At 8:52 a.m., while the glass elevators carried executives through 37 floors of polished confidence and artificial smiles, the CEO's daughter pointed at me in front of the entire onboarding team and said, "You're not for this office." A few people laughed quietly. Someone lowered their eyes. I simply nodded, opened the termination email she proudly copied to HR, and saved it. By 9:14 a.m., the lead investor was standing in the executive conference room, holding a printed $4.1 billion partner exit report, asking one very careful question nobody in the building seemed prepared to answer. Who exactly fired the only person authorized to keep this deal alive? The first thing people noticed about Valeris Global wasn't the size of the building. It was the silence. Not ordinary silence. Not the peaceful kind. This one was expensive. Controlled. The kind built from polished marble floors, soft leather chairs, invisible air conditioning vents, and employees trained to speak like every sentence had already been reviewed by legal counsel. Even the lobby smelled curated. Cedar wood, coffee beans imported from somewhere with mountains nobody there had ever visited. Fresh orchids replaced every morning before sunrise by a florist who billed more monthly than some employees earned in a year. And above it all floated the company slogan in brushed silver letters, "Precision creates power." I remember staring at it while security printed my temporary badge. Not because I was impressed, because I already knew how fragile power really was. "First day?" The receptionist smiled mechanically without looking up from her screen. "Yes." "Orientation starts on level 32. She slid the badge across the counter. Then her eyes paused for half a second when she saw my name. Not long enough to be obvious, just long enough to notice. A tiny shift, like someone hearing a song they recognized but couldn't place. Interesting. I clipped the badge onto my blazer and walked toward the elevators while the morning crowd moved around me like synchronized machinery. Tailored suits, muted watches worth more than cars, voices discussing mergers before breakfast like ordinary people discussed weather. Nobody paid attention to me, which was exactly how I preferred it, because the dangerous people in business rarely entered rooms loudly. The elevator doors opened on level 32 with a soft metallic whisper. Orientation had already started. A long glass conference room overlooked the entire financial district. Screens displayed company values nobody actually believed. Coffee steam beside imported pastries arranged with geometric precision. Around the table sat 12 new hires, nervous smiles, straight backs, fresh ambition, everyone pretending they weren't terrified. A woman from HR stood near the screen holding a tablet. "Perfect timing," she said brightly. "Please take any open seat." I chose the chair closest to the window. Not to admire the skyline, to observe reflections. People reveal themselves when they think nobody is watching. The analyst beside me leaned over quietly. "You picked the wrong seat." "Did I?" "That's hers." "Whose?" Before he could answer, the room changed. It happened instantly, like oxygen disappearing. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Shoulders straightened. Several employees subtly adjusted posture without even realizing it. Then she walked in. Vanessa Laurent, the CEO's daughter, 30 years old, perfect posture, perfect hair, perfect reputation carefully polished by magazines, investors, and people too afraid to disagree with her. She wore white like it was a declaration of ownership. Not fashion. Ownership. Two assistants followed behind her carrying tablets and coffee she never touched herself. And the moment she saw me sitting near the window, her expression hardened almost imperceptibly. Interesting again. She didn't recognize me, but something about me irritated her immediately. That usually meant instinct, the dangerous kind. Vanessa placed her designer handbag onto the table slowly. "You're in my seat." Her voice was calm enough to sound polite, which somehow made it worse. I looked around the room. There were 6 empty chairs. "I can move," I said. "You should." A few uncomfortable smiles appeared around the table. Nobody spoke. Corporate survival teaches people strange habits. One of them is learning how to watch humiliation without participating in it directly. I stood calmly and moved 2 seats away. Simple, easy, forgettable. Except Vanessa kept staring, not at my face, at my clothes, my watch, my shoes, evaluating, categorizing, reducing. The way wealthy people sometimes examine others like inventory instead of humans. Orientation resumed, but her attention kept drifting back toward me every few minutes. Finally, she interrupted the HR manager entirely. "You're the new operations consultant?" "Yes." "Interesting hire." The room went still again. I smiled lightly. "Is it?" Vanessa crossed her arms. "We usually recruit people with stronger corporate backgrounds." There it was. Not criticism, positioning. The corporate version of circling blood in water. "I see," I answered calmly. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She wanted discomfort, defensiveness, apology. What bothered her was the absence of all three. One of the assistants leaned toward her and whispered something. Vanessa glanced at my file folder, then back at me, and suddenly smiled. Not warmly. The kind of smile people use moments before public executions disguised as professionalism. "Oh," she leaned back slowly. "Now I understand." Several people looked confused. Vanessa tapped manicured fingers against the table. "You worked internationally." "Yes." "Mostly external partnerships?" "That's correct." "And no Ivy League?" "No." The assistant smirked first. Then 2 others joined quietly. Tiny sounds, small enough to deny later, large enough to wound intentionally. Vanessa tilted her head. "You know, this company moves very fast." "I've noticed." "Some people simply aren't built for environments like this." The analyst beside me stopped pretending to check his notes. Everyone knew what was happening now. Public filtering, a performance, an alpha demonstration for the room. And Vanessa clearly enjoyed it. She opened my digital profile on the screen in front of everyone. That surprised even HR. "Vanessa," the HR manager began carefully. "It's fine." No, it wasn't. But nobody there had enough authority to say that aloud. Vanessa scanned my file dramatically. "No executive pedigree?" Scroll. "No major institutional references?" Scroll. "No legacy affiliations?" Then she looked directly at me. "You're not really for this office." Silence. Cold. Heavy. The kind that settles into people's stomachs. I heard someone inhale sharply across the room. Vanessa continued calmly. "And honestly, we should stop wasting everyone's time now." The HR manager looked pale. "Perhaps we should discuss." "No." Vanessa never looked away from me. "You're fired." Nobody moved. Nobody blinked. Even the skyline outside suddenly felt frozen behind the glass. One of the assistants actually smiled in satisfaction. There it was. The ritual humiliation completed. Except something unexpected happened. I nodded once, calmly. No argument, no panic, no embarrassment. Just acceptance. That confused her immediately. I opened my laptop. A soft notification appeared. "Termination notice. Temporary access revoked. Fast, aggressive, impulsive. Interesting strategy for someone raised around billion-dollar negotiations." Vanessa folded her arms triumphantly. "There. Much more efficient." I looked at the email quietly for several seconds. Then clicked one button. Save. Not delete. Not reply. Save. A tiny movement. Barely noticeable. But for the first time that morning, something uncertain flickered across Vanessa's face. A sensation she probably wasn't familiar with. Doubt. I closed the laptop gently. "Understood," I said. That was all. No speech, no threats, no dramatic exit, which somehow made the room even more uncomfortable, because people expect emotional explosions. Silence is harder to interpret, and therefore more dangerous. I stood, adjusted my blazer, and walked toward the conference room door, while 20 eyes followed me through reflections in the glass walls. Behind me, Vanessa exhaled lightly like someone who believed a problem had just been removed. But near the elevators, I heard hurried footsteps. The analyst from earlier caught up with me. Wait, I turned. He looked genuinely nervous. I don't think you understand what just happened. I almost smiled. No, I said quietly. I think she doesn't. The elevator doors opened, and somewhere 30 floors above us, hidden behind smoked glass and executive security clearance, an unread overnight report was already moving across the internal investor network toward the one person in the company Vanessa Laurent should never have surprised. The lead partner, the man responsible for the largest external capital relationship in company history. At exactly 9:14 a.m., he was scheduled to open it, and attached to page 3 was my name. At 9:11 a.m., the executive floor still smelled like confidence. 3 floors above the onboarding department, inside a conference suite wrapped in smoked glass and dark walnut walls, senior leadership prepared for what was supposed to be a routine investor alignment meeting. Assistants moved quietly between tables carrying espresso trays. Screens glowed with charts no one was actually reading. Someone from legal laughed too loudly at something unfunny. The atmosphere carried that uniquely corporate illusion that everything important was under control. It wasn't. At the far end of the room sat Adrian Keller, lead investor, primary external stakeholder, architect of the $4.1 billion Eastbridge expansion partnership. Unlike most people in the building, Keller didn't waste energy pretending to be charming. He was 62, silver-haired, painfully observant, and famous for asking questions that made executives suddenly interested in water glasses. People feared him because he listened carefully, and because he remembered everything, especially mistakes. An assistant entered quietly. "Morning packet, sir." Keller nodded once. No small talk. He opened the digital report while the others continued preparing slides around him. Page 1, revenue projections. Page 2, regional exposure metrics. Then page 3 loaded. His eyes stopped moving. Not dramatically, not instantly. Just stopped. A silence appeared around him before anyone understood why. Keller reread the line once, then again. The room slowly noticed. CFO Daniel Mercer adjusted his tie. Adrian, no response. Keller's expression hardened with frightening precision. He zoomed into the report attachment. Authorized partnership mediation contact. Primary negotiation holder. Elena Volkov. And beneath it, status. Access terminated. 8:57 a.m. Now the room changed, not emotionally, structurally, like a bridge developing cracks faster than people could process. Mercer frowned. That can't be right. Keller finally looked up. Who terminated her access? Nobody answered, because nobody important enough yet understood the question. Mercer reached for the tablet nervously. There must be some internal onboarding issue. Keller interrupted without raising his voice. The Eastbridge contract specifically requires direct continuity with the original negotiation intermediary. Silence. A legal advisor near the wall suddenly stopped typing. Another executive looked visibly pale, because now they understood, not completely, but enough. Keller continued calmly. If mediation continuity is broken without investor notification, the partner retains immediate withdrawal rights under Section 12. The room went colder. Someone whispered, Jesus. The CFO grabbed the tablet fully now, scrolling faster, eyes widening. No! Keller's gaze sharpened. When exactly was her access removed? 8:57. And when was the partner scheduled to receive the compliance verification? Mercer swallowed. 9:15. Keller checked the clock. 9:13. 1 minute, one single minute standing between inconvenience and catastrophe. The doors opened suddenly. Vanessa Laurent entered confidently with 2 assistants behind her, still smiling, still operating inside the reality where she controlled the room. Sorry I'm late, she said lightly. Orientation ran longer than expect. Then she stopped. Every face in the room had changed. No one greeted her. No one smiled. Even the assistants sensed danger immediately. Keller turned slowly toward her. "Did you terminate Elena Volkov this morning?" Vanessa blinked once. Not afraid yet, just confused. "Yes," she answered carefully. She wasn't the right fit. The silence afterward felt almost physical, heavy enough to touch. Mercer looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. One legal advisor quietly closed his laptop, as if instinctively distancing himself from future blame. Vanessa frowned slightly. "What?" Keller studied her with the cold attention of a man evaluating structural damage after an explosion. "You fired the primary continuity holder attached to the Eastbridge authorization chain." Vanessa laughed once, a tiny nervous sound. "I think there's some misunderstanding. She was a new hire." "No," Keller replied. "She was the reason the partnership still existed." Now even the air in the room felt unstable. Vanessa's confidence faltered for the first time. "That's impossible," Mercer finally spoke. "Her negotiation credentials weren't listed in standard onboarding." "Because they were attached under restricted investor classification," Keller snapped. One of Vanessa's assistants slowly stepped backward toward the wall. Smart instinct. Predators recognize collapsing environments faster than executives do. Vanessa crossed her arms defensively. "If she was that important, why wasn't I informed?" Keller's expression darkened. "Because important operations are not organized around your comfort." That landed hard. Several executives immediately looked down at the table. Nobody wanted accidental eye contact during executive executions. Vanessa tried again. "She never said any of this." Keller leaned back slowly. "The most dangerous professionals rarely do." 9:14 a.m. A notification appeared on Mercer's tablet, then another. Then three more in rapid succession. The partner legal team had received the system alert. Authorization continuity breach detected. External review initiated. Potential withdrawal protocol available. Mercer's face lost color completely. "They've seen it." Nobody moved. Keller extended his hand calmly. "Give me the tablet." Mercer obeyed instantly. The investor scanned the incoming correspondence silently, while the room waited inside suffocating tension. Finally, Keller looked up. "Eastbridge is requesting immediate clarification regarding Ms. Volkov's removal." Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. For the first time all morning, she looked young. Not powerful, not polished, young. Like someone suddenly realizing the building around her contained machinery she never truly understood. And then came the worst moment. Keller asked the question quietly, not loudly, not emotionally, which somehow made it devastating. "Who authorized you to remove a protected intermediary tied to a $4.1 billion continuity agreement?" No answer came, because there wasn't a good one. Vanessa looked toward HR, toward legal, toward the CFO, searching desperately for shared responsibility. But corporate gravity had already shifted. Nobody stepped forward. Nobody volunteered solidarity. Because survival inside executive environments follows one brutal rule. The moment risk becomes visible, loyalty evaporates. Mercer cleared his throat carefully. She acted independently. There it was, the separation, fast, clean, merciless. Vanessa stared at him in disbelief. "You approved my onboarding authority." "For standard staffing," Mercer replied immediately. "Not protected investor infrastructure." Even the wording changed now. Not employee infrastructure. The room no longer discussed a person. It discussed damage. Keller stood slowly from the table. And somehow, that movement carried more pressure than shouting ever could. "Find Ms. Volkov!" Nobody moved quickly enough. His eyes hardened. "Now." Three executives reached for phones simultaneously. Assistants rushed toward doors. Legal teams began whispering into headsets. Somewhere below them, elevators moved between floors, carrying panic upward through the building like smoke. And meanwhile, outside the tower, across the street, seated calmly at a quiet cafe beneath soft morning rain, Elena Volkov stirred her coffee once, while her phone vibrated endlessly beside the untouched cup. Unknown numbers, executive extensions, priority calls. She ignored every single one, then calmly opened the termination email again and smiled at the attachment she had saved at 8:57 a.m. Because some people walk into corporations looking for careers, others walk in already knowing exactly where the pressure points are hidden. And by the time Valeris Global understood the difference, the silence inside the building had become terror. If you've ever seen someone underestimated because they looked too calm, too ordinary, or too quiet for a powerful room, subscribe now. These stories are for everyone who knows that real authority rarely announces itself first. And trust me, the next move Elena makes inside Valeris Global is the moment the entire executive floor finally understands what they destroyed themselves. By 9:32 a.m., Valeris Global no longer looked like a corporation. It looked like a controlled emergency. The change was subtle at first. Assistants walking faster than usual, doors closing harder, phones no longer ringing naturally but vibrating constantly in nervous hands. Then came the executive floor lockdown. Not official, unofficially official. The kind companies use when billions begin shifting beneath polished floors. Inside conference room A, nobody touched the expensive breakfast trays anymore. Croissants hardened quietly beside untouched fruit. Coffee went cold, and Vanessa Laurent sat at the far end of the table, trying very hard not to look afraid, which only made it more visible. CFO Daniel Mercer paced near the windows, while legal teams argued in low voices around him. The continuity clause was buried under investor protection indexing. Why wasn't executive leadership informed? It was restricted after the Singapore arbitration issue. That still doesn't explain how onboarding authority reached Vanessa. It wasn't supposed to. Keller remained silent through most of it, watching, calculating. The dangerous thing about experienced investors is that they rarely react emotionally during crises. They observe patterns. And right now, Keller was seeing one very clearly. This wasn't just a staffing error. It was a leadership failure. Vanessa suddenly stood. Enough. Her voice cracked slightly on the first syllable. Tiny detail, devastating effect. Everyone noticed. She straightened immediately. We're acting like she controls the company. Nobody answered. Because technically, at this exact moment, she controlled whether the company lost a $4.1 billion partner. And everyone in the room knew it. Vanessa looked toward Keller, desperately searching for support. She can't just disappear over one email. Keller finally spoke. She disappeared because you informed her she was disposable. The words landed softly, like snow covering something dead. Vanessa folded her arms tightly. She was disrespectful. Mercer stared at her in disbelief. Disrespectful? She challenged the atmosphere of the room. That sentence hung in the air long enough for several executives to visibly process how catastrophic it sounded. One legal advisor slowly removed his glasses. Another quietly looked at the table to hide what might have been regret, because now the real problem became impossible to ignore. Vanessa had not made a strategic decision. She had made an emotional one. And emotional decisions inside billion-dollar structures are remembered forever. Keller walked toward the windows overlooking the city. Rain streaked softly across the glass. Cars below moved like tiny nervous insects through silver streets. Without turning around, he asked, "Did anyone here actually review Elena Volkov's negotiation history?" Silence. That told him enough. He nodded once. "I did." Now the room listened differently. Keller rarely volunteered information unless it mattered. She stabilized the Jakarta refinery dispute in 11 hours. A few executives exchanged looks. She reversed the Osaka withdrawal vote after legal deadlock. More silence. And she personally prevented Eastbridge from exiting during the Zurich compliance panic last year. Mercer slowly sat down because he finally understood the scale completely now. Vanessa didn't fire an employee. She fired institutional trust. And trust is harder to replace than money. Vanessa's voice dropped lower. Then why wasn't she in executive records? Keller finally turned toward her. Because people like Elena are usually hidden deliberately. The room remained perfectly still. Keller continued. High-level negotiations require someone who can move between governments, investors, legal structures, and internal politics without becoming visible. He paused. She was invisible by design. That sentence changed everything. Suddenly, small details from the morning began rearranging themselves inside people's minds. Her calmness, the absence of panic, saving the email, the way she walked out without arguing. Not weakness, preparation. Mercer muttered quietly, almost to himself. She knew. Keller nodded once. Yes. The realization spread through the room slowly and horribly. Elena Volkov hadn't been surprised by the firing. She had recognized an opportunity. Meanwhile, 23 floors below, HR Director Melissa Grant sat frozen inside her office, rereading the onboarding chain for the 6th time. Her stomach hurt, because buried inside a secondary authorization attachment was a sentence nobody had noticed before today. Termination or reassignment of intermediary personnel requires investor acknowledgement prior to access modification. Signed, time-stamped, verified, ignored. Melissa closed her eyes. Some careers end dramatically. Others end through email metadata. Her office phone rang again. Executive floor, 4th time in 7 minutes. She answered carefully. Yes. Have you located Volkov? No. Find her. Click. No goodbye. No professionalism left anymore. Only urgency. Across the building, rumors spread faster than official information ever could. She handled the Eastbridge contract. No, she owned part of the negotiation rights. I heard the investors won't continue without her. They say Keller is furious. They say Vanessa's father already knows. That last rumor traveled fastest, because everyone feared the same thing. CEO Lucien Laurent was still in Geneva, and when he landed, someone would need to explain why his daughter triggered a potential multi-billion-dollar collapse before lunch. Back in conference room A, Vanessa checked her phone repeatedly now. Still no reply from Elena. She typed another message. Vanessa, I think the situation escalated unnecessarily. Let's discuss calmly. No response. Another message. Vanessa, we may have misunderstood each other this morning. Still nothing, Keller noticed. She won't answer you. Vanessa looked up sharply. And you know that how? Because experienced negotiators never respond during leverage expansion. The phrase sounded clinical, which made it terrifying. Vanessa laughed nervously. You're making her sound dangerous. Keller's eyes remained cold. No. A pause. I'm making her sound expensive. That silence afterward was different from the earlier ones. Not shock, recognition, because everyone in the room finally understood the same brutal truth simultaneously. The balance of power had already left the building with Elena Volkov, and every minute she stayed silent, the price of bringing her back increased. At 10:06 a.m., CEO Lucien Laurent's jet touched down in Zurich. By 10:11, his encrypted phone had already received 14 priority notifications. By 10:14, he stopped responding to everyone except Adrian Keller. And by 10:19, the atmosphere inside Valaris Global became something far worse than panic, expectation. Because fear inside corporations is temporary. Waiting for the person who owns the building to arrive? That's different. That changes oxygen. Employees spoke quieter. Assistants walked straighter. Even senior executives suddenly rediscovered humility. On the executive floor, nobody had left conference room A in nearly 40 minutes. Legal teams rotated in and out carrying tablets filled with risk projections that grew uglier every update. Potential investor freeze, regulatory review exposure, partner instability risk, stock sensitivity analysis. One estimate projected a possible 11% market reaction if Eastbridge publicly questioned continuity confidence. Nobody said that number aloud twice. Vanessa sat motionless now. The earlier arrogance had drained away, leaving behind something sharper and more human: self-preservation. She reread Elena's employee file again and again, searching desperately for something everyone else had missed, some clue, some weakness. Instead, she found almost nothing. Minimal public history, minimal interviews, minimal internal exposure. Even the recommendations were strangely vague. Consistently effective under pressure. Trusted in sensitive environments. Exceptional continuity management. No dramatic achievements, no self-promotion, no ego. Like someone had intentionally erased fingerprints from an important weapon. Vanessa whispered quietly, "Who are you?" Keller heard her. "She's someone who understands leverage better than most CEOs. Mercer rubbed his forehead. "We need immediate containment." "You don't have containment anymore," Keller replied. "You have negotiation." That distinction hurt, because negotiations imply something terrifying. The other side now has power. At 10:27, the conference room doors opened. Chief Legal Officer Miriam Vale entered quickly holding a tablet. Her face alone changed the room. "What happened?" Mercer asked immediately. Miriam placed the tablet onto the table without sitting down. Eastbridge suspended provisional authorization review. Nobody breathed. They're requesting direct confirmation from Volkov before proceeding further. Vanessa stood abruptly. "That's insane." "No," Keller said quietly. "It's disciplined." Miriam continued. "They also reference continuity and stability concerns under Section 12. Mercer closed his eyes briefly. There it was again. Section 12. The clause nobody respected until it started destroying careers. Vanessa shook her head. "This is absurd. One consultant cannot freeze an entire partnership." Keller looked directly at her. "She already has." That sentence hit harder than shouting ever could, because reality becomes unbearable the moment denial expires. Vanessa grabbed her phone again. Another message. "Vanessa, I'd like to apologize for this morning." No response. Her fingers tightened around the device. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, she had entered a situation money could not immediately soften. And she hated it. Meanwhile, across the city, Elena Volkov sat inside a quiet private lounge above an old hotel restaurant overlooking the river. Rain rolled gently across tall windows. Classical piano drifted softly through hidden speakers. The environment carried the strange stillness of places designed for discreet conversations between powerful people. Her laptop remained open beside untouched tea. 3 phones vibrated intermittently across the table. Executive extensions, unknown investor numbers, legal outreach attempts. Ignored. Elena instead reviewed the termination email once more. Not emotionally, technically, timestamp, authorization path, metadata chain, CC structure, everything exactly where it needed to be. A waiter approached carefully. "Another tea, Ms. Volkov?" "Yes, thank you." No stress in her voice, no visible urgency, which made the contrast almost cruel. Because inside Valaris Global, entire departments now operated like people trying to stop water flooding through cracked glass. And the woman holding the pressure point was calmly ordering tea. Her private phone lit up once. One message only. Adrian Keller. Keller. Was this intentional? Elena read it for several seconds, then finally replied. Elena. No. But their reaction afterward was informative. Keller stared at the response inside conference room A. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not warmly, appreciatively, like a chess player recognizing another one. Mercer noticed immediately. What did she say? Keller locked the screen. Enough! Vanessa stepped forward. What does that mean? Keller's expression remained unreadable. It means she's still evaluating whether this company deserves rescue. Silence. Real silence this time. Not corporate silence. Human silence. The kind built from realization. Vanessa laughed once, nervously. She's enjoying this. Keller looked at her carefully. No. Another pause. She's measuring consequences. Those words settled heavily into the room, because everyone suddenly understood something deeply uncomfortable. Elena wasn't acting emotionally, which meant she was acting strategically, and strategic people are infinitely harder to control. At 10:41 a.m., another notification arrived. Mercer checked it first, then froze. Keller noticed immediately. What? Mercer swallowed hard. The media monitoring team flagged unusual investor traffic. How unusual? Mercer looked sick now. Someone leaked internal continuity concerns. The room erupted instantly. From where? Was it Eastbridge? Who had access? Can this be contained? Miriam answered quietly. Not if financial reporters start connecting it to authorization disruption. Vanessa stared at the table, because now the situation had evolved beyond internal embarrassment. Once investors smell instability, markets begin hunting weakness, like predators sensing blood underwater. And Valaris Global suddenly smelled vulnerable. Keller checked the time. 10:43. Then he looked toward the rain beyond the glass walls and spoke the sentence nobody wanted to hear. Lucian lands in 32 minutes. The room fell silent again. Even the assistant stopped moving. Because Lucien Laurent was famous for many things. Precision, discipline, control. But above all, he was famous for never forgiving avoidable mistakes. And everyone in that room now understood the same terrifying reality. Before noon, the CEO of Valaris Global would walk into this building and ask one simple question. Who caused this? And for the first time that morning, nobody wanted to be standing too close to Vanessa Laurent when he did. At 11:17 a.m., every screen inside Valaris Global displayed the same notification. Executive priority arrival confirmed. Lucien Laurent was in the building. The effect was immediate. Conversations died mid-sentence. Phones disappeared from hands. People straightened instinctively, like gravity itself had changed direction. Because Lucien Laurent did not raise his voice often. He didn't need to. Entire careers had collapsed beneath quieter sentences. The private elevator opened directly into the executive corridor with a soft mechanical whisper. And then he appeared, tall, controlled. Dark charcoal coat, still carrying traces of cold European rain. No entourage theatrics, no dramatic energy, just presence, the dangerous kind. The hallway cleared almost automatically as he walked toward conference room A. Nobody attempted small talk. Nobody attempted explanations. Instinct told them the same thing predators in forests understand naturally. Do not move unnecessarily when something powerful is assessing damage. Inside the conference room, Vanessa stood immediately. Dad. Lucian raised one hand gently. Not aggressive, far worse, precise. Silence. He entered slowly while assistants closed the doors behind him. Keller remained seated. Everyone else stood. Lucian placed leather gloves onto the table one finger at a time before finally speaking. What happened? No one answered immediately. Not because they didn't know, because nobody wanted ownership of the first sentence. Mercer finally cleared his throat. There was an onboarding issue involving a protected intermediary attached to East Bridge. Lucian looked at him once. Cold. Translated. Mercer hesitated. Vanessa stepped in quickly. I removed a consultant from onboarding this morning. Lucian turned toward her. And? She turned out to have investor-level continuity authorization. The room remained absolutely still. Lucian's expression did not visibly change, which terrified everyone more. He looked toward Keller. How exposed are we? Keller answered directly. Potentially catastrophic if mishandled further. Lucian nodded once, not shocked, not angry, calculating. When was she terminated? 8:57. When did Eastbridge detect the disruption? 9:14. Lucian glanced briefly at the wall clock, then toward Vanessa again. Did she resist? The question confused several people. Vanessa frowned slightly. No. No argument? No. No emotional response? She just saved the email. For the first time since entering the room, Lucian's eyes sharpened noticeably. A tiny reaction. But Keller noticed immediately. So did Miriam Vale, because experienced operators understood exactly what that meant. Saving documentation before leaving isn't emotional behavior. It's strategic preservation. Lucian spoke again. Describe her exit. Vanessa crossed her arms defensively. She left? That is not a description. She walked out calmly. Anything else? Vanessa hesitated now. 1 second too long. Lucian noticed. She said, I think she doesn't. Silence. Lucian turned toward the window slowly. Rain continued sliding across the glass like thin silver fractures. Finally, he asked, Has anyone here reviewed Elena Volkov's actual negotiation architecture? Nobody answered, which answered everything. Lucian exhaled quietly through his nose. Disappointment, not rage. Executives fear disappointment more. Because anger can pass, disappointment becomes memory. Keller finally spoke. She was continuity infrastructure. Lucian nodded faintly. Yes. Vanessa stared between them. You both keep talking about her like she's irreplaceable. Lucian looked directly at his daughter for the first time since entering, and the room instantly felt colder. No, he said calmly. I'm talking about her like she already knows exactly how replaceable we are. That sentence landed brutally. Vanessa opened her mouth. Nothing came out, because deep down, she had begun realizing it too. Lucian walked toward the head of the table, every movement measured, controlled, like someone placing pieces carefully onto a chessboard nobody else could fully see. Current status, Miriam answered immediately. Eastbridge paused continuity verification pending direct confirmation from Volkov. Media exposure? Contained for now, but investor chatter has started. Internal leak source? Unknown. Lucian nodded, then finally asked the most important question in the room. Where is she? Nobody knew. That fact alone visibly irritated him. Not emotionally, operationally, because systems were failing. Mercer spoke carefully. We've attempted direct outreach. And? No response. Lucian looked toward Keller. You contacted her. Not a question. Keller nodded once. She responded. Now everyone focused entirely on him. Vanessa stepped forward immediately. What did she say? Keller remained silent for a moment, then answered. She said your reaction was informative. The room absorbed that slowly. Lucian, however, understood instantly. And unfortunately, so did Vanessa, because suddenly the morning looked different. Not random, not chaotic, observable. Elena had walked into the onboarding room and quietly studied everyone there. Their behavior, their instincts, their discipline, their emotional control. And Valeris Global had failed the test almost immediately. Lucian lowered his eyes briefly, thinking. Then he asked something unexpected. Who approved Vanessa's unrestricted onboarding authority? Nobody spoke. Mercer finally answered carefully. I signed the access expansion request. Lucian looked at him. No anger, Only consequence. Effective immediately, your executive permissions are suspended pending review. Mercer's face lost color. Just like that. No shouting, no debate. One sentence. Destroyed. Vanessa stared in shock. Dad, Lucian interrupted without raising his voice. This company nearly triggered a $4 billion collapse before lunch. Silence. You do not yet understand the scale of what you touched. That hurt her more than anger could have, because for the first time in her life, someone inside this building was not protecting her from consequences. Lucian removed his watch calmly and placed it beside the gloves. A habit, apparently. Keller recognized it immediately. Interesting. Very interesting. Because according to old executive rumors, Lucien Laurent only removed his watch before negotiations he considered dangerous. Meanwhile, across the river, Elena Volkov finally closed her laptop. Outside, the rain had softened into mist, drifting between old stone buildings and dark water. Her phone vibrated again. This time the caller ID was different. Lucien Laurent. She watched it ring once, twice, 3 times, then answered calmly. Good morning. Inside conference room A, nobody breathed. Lucian's voice remained perfectly controlled. Ms. Volkov. Mr. Laurent? A pause. Professional. Measured. Like two chess players quietly acknowledging the board. Then Lucian asked the question everyone else had been too emotional to ask correctly all day. What would you require in order to continue? Not, please come back. Not, can we fix this? Not even, what happened? Straight to terms. Elena looked out across the river before answering. And when she finally spoke, her voice remained calm enough to become terrifying. That depends. A silence settled over both sides of the call, slow, heavy, expensive. Then Elena added softly, do you want damage control or the truth about your company? Nobody inside conference room A moved, because deep down, every person there suddenly realized the same thing. The real crisis at Valeris Global had not started when Elena was fired. It started the moment she decided to speak.